Hello again. In this video we're going to talk about speed. Now if you haven't watched the previous video called Motion Vocabulary, I recommend you do that prior to continuing with this video. Alright, let's look at speed. If I were to ask you what it means to go 20 miles per hour, what would that tell you? And you'll probably say something like, well, that's how fast you're going. And that would be correct. Speed is a measurement of how fast you're going. But let's break that down a little bit and look at it a little more closely, see what we can figure out about it. Now, in this example, I have created a number line. And I have broken it down into 5 equal-sized segments. Now, I'm going to take a pen, let me get my pen here, and I'm going to say that during this segment of our trip, I traveled for 1 hour. Each trip, or each segment, is an hour long. And I'm also going to say that each segment, I go 20 miles. So, based on that information, we can say a number of things about this trip. Number one, we can say 20 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour is the speed of our entire trip, because we know that the speed formula tells us that speed is equal to distance divided by time. So we can look at each one of these times and look at the miles driven and come up with our speed. Now that also works for the entire trip. If we add this up, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and we add up the hours, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we divide that, we get a speed equals 20 miles per hour. So it works in this case because it's the same for each segment. Now, because this is the same, because the distance traveled for each hour is the same, we can also say that 24 miles per hour, or 20 miles per hour is a constant speed. Constant meaning not changing. So during this entire trip we drove 20 miles per hour. It didn't change, it's constant. Alright, let's look at another example. Here I've got the same number of segments, and I'm going to say they are 1 hour each. However, notice that they're not equal length. So I'm going to say during this first hour we went 20 miles. During the second hour we went 30. During this time right here, actually that should be 0 size because we stopped to go to the restroom, get some gasoline, and have something to eat. So we drove 0 miles during that entire hour. During this segment we went 30, and this segment we went 20. So let's take a look at our entire trip first. We went 20. Plus 30 is 50, plus 0 is 50, plus 30 is 80, plus 20 is 100. Speed is equal to 100 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. So our speed in this case is still 20 miles per hour. And to be more accurate, we can say that this is our average speed. Just like you find average of your grades by adding them all up and dividing by the number of grades, we can do that with our miles and hours as well. 100 divided by 5 is 20. We can also do that with any number of the segments. So if I take, let's say, these 3, and I go 20 plus 30 is 50, plus 0 is 50 miles. And I drove that in 1, 2, 3 hours. That will give me my speed if I divide 50 miles by 3 hours. Let's do that over here. 3 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. 5 minus 3 is 2. Bring down the 0. There are 6 3's in 20, or 3 times 6 is actually 18. 3 times 6 is 18. Subtract, we get 20. It looks like it's going to repeat because here we have 20 again, and we just divided it 3 into 20, so we'll get the same number over and over and over. So our speed in this case, or average speed for these first 3 segments, is 16.66 miles per hour. And you might say, well, Mr. Maxwell, how can our average speed be 20 if the speed during the first 3 segments was only 16? And the answer is that because we stopped here to use a restroom, and because we didn't drive any distance during that time, we needed to drive faster during some of these other segments to make up for it, and we still averaged out to 20 miles per hour. So let's quickly review what definition of speed is. Speed is the distance traveled over a period of time, or another way of saying that is how fast something is going. Let me ask you this question. Would you say that speed is a scalar quantity, or would you say that it is a vector quantity? Think about that. 20 miles per hour. All right. If you said scalar, you would be correct. Why is it scalar? Because it has no directions. When I say 20 miles per hour, that tells you how far I went in 1 hour, but it doesn't tell you what direction. So speed is indeed a scalar quantity. The next thing we're going to look at is graphing speed. So whenever you're looking at these motion graphs, the first thing you need to do is look at the axis labels. In this case, we have time on the x-axis, and we have distance on the y-axis. And we just said that distance and time together, distance over time, gives us speed. So this is indeed a speed graph. Now I'm just going to put some numbers in here so we'll have something to work with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. And I'm going to say 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. This would be 120, 140. You want to keep these increments or these intervals the same amount. 160, 180. Okay, so we'll say that that represents miles, and this represents hours. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a line, and I'm going to draw that line in here like this. And our goal is to figure out what that line represents. Well, we know it represents speed because this is a distance over time graph, but we want to be more specific than that. Let me get my pen. If I take the 1 hour and I come up to this line and come over, it looks like I've gone 20 miles. So after 1 hour, I've gone 20 miles. How about during the second hour? So from 1 to 2 is another hour, the second hour. I went 40 miles? No, that's the total. The second hour I actually drove from 20 to 40. So during the second hour, I did 20 miles. And we could do the same thing for each one of these, and you would find that for all of these hours, I drove 20. This is a constant speed of 20 miles per hour. So what can we get out of this? Well, if we have a straight line like this, not curved, it's going nice and straight up like this, that shows that we're traveling at a constant speed, in this case 20 miles per hour. We can look at each one of these segments and figure out what the speed is, or we can look at the entire graph and figure out what the speed was for the entire trip. Let's try that. I'm going to say the entire trip took us 9 hours. It looks like this line might be a little longer than that, but I'm going to come up 9 hours, and this isn't quite drawn right, but I'm going to say it was 180 miles. So speed equals 180 divided by 9. S is equal to 20 miles per hour. There you go. That's our average speed again for the entire trip. And it matches what we did each hour because this is a constant speed. It's a nice straight line, so this is a constant speed. All right, let's look at another one. If you need to go back and do that, remember you've got the rewind button. Don't be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to look at it a second time. And I'm going to select this line. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to select my line tool, and I'm going to put in another one. Ta-da! There's our speed graph. Alright, so let's look at what this one means. This one looks a little bit different. So, if I look at time 0, it shows that I'm at 40 miles. So what that means, let's say this is our reference point. At time 0, I'm already 40 miles away from it. So I'm really starting here, not at the reference point. And then look, as time passes, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, 4 hour, what happens to time? It doesn't change. It stays 40, 40, 40, 40, 40. And if my distance is not changing, what does that tell you about speed? Speed is equal to 0 miles per hour. We're not moving. This is perfectly still. We're not moving at all. So that one's not too bad. Let's look at one more. Let me select this line and get rid of it. Select my line tool. I'm going to make it just a little bit narrower this time. Alright, so I'm going to say our trip goes like this. Boom. And then it goes like this. Boom. And then it goes like this. Boom. Now, can you analyze what this trip is all about? Well, let's see. We're starting at the reference point, so we're starting here at home. We're starting at whatever our reference point is. After 2 hours, I'm going to draw this a little bit off. We've gone 80 miles. So that would be 80 divided by 2. That equals 40 miles per hour. So for the first 2 hours, we went 40 miles per hour. And then what happened? We stopped. And how long did we stop for? Well, we stopped from 2 hours to 5 hours, so that would be a total of 3 hours in here. So we're stopped. And then we started moving again, but are we moving faster or slower than before? Well, let's look at it. If we go from 5 to 8 hours, that's 3 hours. And we only went from 80 to 100, so that's only 20 miles. So we got 20 miles in 3 hours. And I'm going to do the math for you. If we divide that, we're going to get 6.66 miles per hour. So notice that the line is not as steep. So that means we're not going as fast. Here we're going fast. And here we're going slow. Or slower, relatively slow. Actually, I guess the whole trip is pretty slow. 40 miles per hour and 6.6 miles per hour and 0 miles per hour is not very fast. So, anyway, that's how you interpret the speed graph. Remember, look for distance. If you see distance here and time here, then this line represents the speed. And you can figure out the speed by looking at the distances traveled over the period of time. I'm going to stop there. Next video, we'll take a look at velocity. So in the meantime, take care and keep learning.